right, so here we've got our frog's insides. And we can look, point out that we have two layers here. So this is one and then two. And so what we've got there is we have these two separate layers of fabric, and the outer one is kind of a little bit thinner and crispier, the skin, and the softer, thicker layer is the frog's abdominal muscles. So we kind of remove that. There's also kind of cobwebby stuff that's less kind of connective, binding the organs to the wall. So there wasn't, you can kind of see a little bit on the edge, but there wasn't a lot of that kind of connective tissue, cobwebby kind of tissue here. So they come away neatly. There's not that kind of, there was much more of that in the pig, that kind of connective tissue that kind of bound everything together. So once we open up this big window and we look into our frog, we can kind of see something interesting. If we can kind of compare the top and bottom here of his insides. Let me just rest my hand a little there so you kind of get a better view. So he's kind of interesting here. Usually, well, not usually, but what we saw in us was that there was this kind of clear distinction between the top and the bottom, right? We had, our thoracic cavity and our abdominal cavity. When we look at the torso of our frog here, it's just this kind of big bag with all the organs inside. And in the mammals, there's that clear upper and lower half. And there's a separation, a diaphragm muscle. When you look at this, the frog is missing a rib cage, and there's no diaphragm. No rib cage and no diaphragm in a frog. So all of these organs are kind of in this bundle here without a divider. And, we can see that. I can take a little toothpick and you can kind of see there's no divider here. There's no there's no muscle layer there for a diaphragm. So that's kind of interesting. And at first glance, it seems pretty obvious. We've got his heart in there, right there. We've got his heart, and we've got these spongy things on each side, which look kind of like lungs. And the lower half, we see what looks like digestive organs. We see something that looks kind of like a stomach and like intestines. So far that looks kind of similar, but when we kind of follow things around, we have a little bit of a kind of confusion. What if we have our if we kind of follow things down, we can see that food goes into the stomach here, so we can figure that out and we follow it. And we've got intestines. We can see that food goes into the stomach here, and we can follow it and goes into intestines. But what about the liver? So that's, if we look at this, if we came up here and we said, well, this has lobes, and this looks dense, but we said that those look kind of like the lungs. They're next to the heart. So now we need to take a closer look, because this kind of makes things kind of confusing. We're missing something that's kind of important. And what we can do is if we lift up right here, we look underneath, see that little bag? Let's see. See if we can make it easier there to see. No, yeah, I can poke it maybe a little bit. Or I can maybe move him a little bit. Yes, that makes it a little bit easier to see. There's a little bag there. And I'm going to try, it's right here. It's a little soft bag. Very kind of fragile. And one of the things that we can, now you can see it a little bit better there. Just that little bag under there. They're small. And one of the things that we notice is if we put a toothpick, if we take a toothpick and we put it from our trachea, if we put it down, it winds up in that bag. So now this is something very different. This is not kind of what we'd expect. Because when we're looking at this, it seems like, like we'd expect this to be lungs. But this is actually liver. And so our frog has these really, really tiny, fragile sacs for their lungs. The big spongy thing on top here is actually the liver. Let me pause and we'll